Hello and welcome to the video Spring Security Limit Login Attempts example with me, Nam Hamin from CodeJava.net. Through this video, I will help you write code to tighten security, improve security of an existing Spring Boot application by implementing the Limit Login Attempts security feature. The purpose of the Limit Failed Login Attempts feature is to prevent brute-force attacks. For example, an attacker can try to waste password by submitting many passwords at mass to eventually find a correct one. And this is a strategy which we will be using to prevent brute-force login attacks. The maximum number of failed attempts is 3, and the user account is locked on the third failed attempt. And the lock duration is 24 hours. And the user account will be unlocked after the lock duration expires upon the login attempt. When the user tries to log in by entering a correct email but a wrong password, the application displays the error message "Bad credentials" at normal, and the user can enter wrong password maximum 3 times, and at the third failed attempt, his account will be locked, and the application shows the message "Your account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts." It will be unlocked after 24 hours. And after the lock duration expires, and when the user tries to log in again, his account will be unlocked, and the message is "Your account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again." And to help you easily understand the workflow of the limit login attempts security feature, I draw this diagram. First, when the user attempts to log in from the login page, the application checks if login successful or not. If not, meaning that the user enters a wrong password, we check if the user account is locked or not. If not, we check the maximum number of failed attempts is 3 or not. If not, we increase the number of failed attempts by 1 and return the user to the login page with an appropriate error message. In case the number of failed attempts is 3, we lock the user account and display a warning message in the login page. And in case the user account is locked, the application will try to unlock the account if lock time expires. And in case the user has successfully logged in, the application will reset the failed attempts number if any. So in the next few minutes, I will show you how to implement the code based on this workflow. So we will be updating an existing Java project based on this technologies, Spring Boot Starter Web for Java web applications, Spring Data JPA and Hibernate for the data access layer, Spring Security for authentication, Thymeleaf as template engine, HTML and Bootstrap for responsive user interface, and MySQL database to store the user's information. And here are the key steps which we will follow. First, we need to update the table users in the database to add some new columns to implement the limit login attempts security feature, and then we need to update the entity class user accordingly. And then we need to update the service class to implement the function that updates failed attempts number, lock account and unlock account. And to implement the workflow, we need to create an authentication failure handler to limit the login attempts upon failed login. And we also need to implement an authentication success handler in order to reset the failed attempts number upon the successful login. Let me show you an existing Java Spring Boot project here. You see the Submit backend project. And in this Spring project, I used Spring Security for authentication, login, logout. And as you can see in the Spring application configuration file, it is configured to be running on an embedded Tomcat server listening on port 8080, and the context path is /shopMeAdmin. And let me start this Spring Boot application. And this is my MySQL Workbench program, and I connected to my MySQL database server on the local host, and this is a ShopMeDB database. As you can see in the configuration file, the database ShopMeDB is used by this application. Yeah, and this is you see, this is users table that stores the information about the users. And let me select rows from this table, and you can see there are many users in this table. And let me log in using this email address of this user, and you can see the password is encrypted. Okay, the application is up and running. As you can see, Tomcat server started on port 8080 with context path /shopMeAdmin here, and I used Chrome browser to access the application. ShopMeAdmin here, and by default, all the pages in this application require the user to log in. So I enter the email here and password. So I have logged in successfully, as you can see. And this is a list of users in the application, as you can see. Now I log out, and let me try to log in as a different user. This time I want to log in as this user. Let me see the user here, the user Ari Raja here. Sorry. Copy the email of the user Ali Raja, and I try to enter wrong password, and you can see I got the error bad credentials here. And currently I can try to log in as many times as I want to guess the correct password. So as you can see, this we open the door to attackers to perform brute force attack to find the password. So in the next few minutes, I will show you how to write code to tighten security to improve the security of this login form to limit the failed login attempts. First, before writing code, we need to update the users table in the database to add three additional columns that are failed attempt, account non-logged, and log time. The failed attempt column to store the number of failed attempt logins by the user, and the value is from 0 to the maximum number of failed attempt is 3, and the column account non-logged is of a boolean type true or false to indicate that whether the user account is logged or not. By default, all the account users are not logged. So we update the database table users here. Right click on the table. Okay, so we need to add the column failed underscore attempt, and the data type is tiny integer. Tiny integer here, and the value, the default value is 0, and the Next column is account underscore none underscore locked. The data is tiny int as well, because MySQL interprets Boolean data type as tiny int. Or you can select Boolean from the drop-down list here, but it will convert to tiny int, as you can see. And the default value is true, with value 1, meaning true, to indicate that all the user accounts are not locked. And the last additional column is lock underscore time, to store the value of the date and time at which the user is locked due to failed attempts, reach the maximum number of failed attempts. So we specify the data type is date time here, date time. Okay, that's it. And by default, the value of this column is no. Click apply to execute the SQL script to add that these 3 columns. Finished. Okay. And let's select all rows from the users table again. And you can see the addition new columns appear here. Failed attempt, account unlocked, and lock time. And the default values for failed attempt is 0. Account unlocked is 1, meaning not locked. And in the project, we need to update the corresponding entity class accordingly. So I search for the entity class user here, as you can see, and we declare additional fields to map with the additional columns which we have created so far. Private boolean account none locked, and failed attempt, to store the number of failed attempt logins, and log time of type Java UTDate log time. And we need to use the annotation column to specify the name of the column in the table user account underscore none underscore locked. And for the column failed attempt, failed underscore attempt, and log time, log underscore time. And then we also need to generate getter and setter methods for those new fields. So right click here, search, generate getter and setters, select all these new fields, generate. That's it for the update of the user tables and entity class user. Okay, the application has restarted and try to log in again to make sure that the change we have made to the database table and the entity class doesn't affect the program. Now I try to log in successfully. Okay, successful login and log out. And we also need to update the user details class, which is used by Spring Security here. Let me see. The submit user details class here that implements the user details interface defined by Spring Security to represent an authenticated user upon successful login. And you can see in this interface user details is define a method called is account unlocked here. So in the getter is account unlocked here, we should return the value of the user object is account unlocked. This method which we have created previously. Yeah. Okay. Save the change and let try to let me try to update the user Ali Raja in this users table. Update the column, the value of the column account unlocked to 0, meaning that the account is locked, and so we cannot log in using this username. Okay, apply. And you can see update the account unlocked equals 0. Apply. Finished. And let me try to log in as the user Ari Raza here. And you can see Spring Security shows an exception. Error message user account is locked here. That means Spring Security depends on the property is account unlocked to check the login to implement the authentication process. Display the error message here. Next, we need to update the user repository interface in Spring Data API here to define a method that we update the number of failed login attempts. So we declare a new method here, public void update failed attempt, and we use the custom query, and the query is update user u set u failed attempt equal the value of the first parameter in the method here, int failed attempt, and the condition is the email of the user, where u.email equal to the value of the second parameter in the method here. And because this is an update statement, so we need to use the annotation modify. Okay, and we should create a new the unit test method. So in this project, I already have test class for user here. Let me see user test. Yeah, this here data API test. Okay, and I create a new test method to test this method. Update failed attempt here. Test public void test update failed attempt. And the user email is we use the email of the user Ari Raza here. So copy and paste here. And the number of failed attempt login is failed attempt equal 2, for example, and we call repo update failed attempt here, passing the values of failed attempt and email. And we can assert this test by using a test entity manager here, while private test entity manager. Entity manager. If you have not been familiar with the Spring Boot testing for repository, you can check my video Spring Boot testing repositories in my YouTube channel. And here we use an entity manager to get the user object. For example, file here user not class, and primary key is the ID of the user, integer user ID. The ID of the user ID Raza is 18, as you can see here, 18 here, and we get the user from the database, and we assert the value of the get failed attempt here. Assert equals expected is failed attempt, and actual is the value of the getter method get failed attempt of the return the user object. Okay, now let's run this test method. Run as the unit test. Okay, you see the test has passed successfully with the green check mark here. Now let me verify in the database, and you can see there is a Rarizaza, the values for the column failed attempt was 0 before, and now let's refresh user Ariraza here, and you can see the value of the column failed attempt of the user Ariraza is now the number 2 here, exactly the value we used in the test method. So that means the method update failed attempt in the user repository interface is correctly implemented. Next, in order to implement the workflow of the security feature limit login attempts, we need to implement an authentication failure handler to execute this custom logics upon failed login. Yeah, if the user failed to login, and we need to execute this business logics in a authentication failure handler. So in the project, we need to create a new class here. Create a new class custom login failure handler here, and this should extend the class simple URL authentication failure handler here. Finish, and we should annotate this class using the component annotation, and we need to override the method on authentication failure here. This method will be invoked by Spring Security upon failed login, and we run the workflow here in this method, and in the Spring Security configuration class here we need to configure the failure handler for the form login here. Before that, we need to declare a few of custom login failure handler here, login failure handler, and have Spring Framework to inject an instance of this class into this configuration class using the annotation auto-wide here. And here we specify failure handler here, which is the login failure handler instance here. And in this uh, custom login failure handler, we need to use an instance of the customer service class. In this project, I have the customer service class, sorry, user service class that implements business logic related to users here. And in the next few minutes, we update this service class to implement the limit login attempts. So here we tell Spring Security to inject an instance of the user service class into this failure handler. User services, user service, and to make this handler redirect the user to the error page upon failed login, we need to call this uh, method from the super class superset before failure URL is slash login question mark error. This is a default failure URL used by Spring Framework when a user fails to log in. And then in the security here, we need to permit public access to the login page. So we need to permit all for the login URL here. Okay, and here in the callback method on authentication failure, I get the email of in the login form. Email equal request get parameter email, because in the custom login form you can see this is a custom login form. The field name of the input type email and name email here, you see. And then in the user service class, I have a method to get the user by email here. So I get a user object based on email here. Import, and I check if user is not no, then we can process the workflow to limit the number of login attempts. User failed to login for testing purpose, and we print the email. Else, we print email not exist. Okay, save all the changes, and we are ready to test. And before that, I update the value of the column account unlocked equal 1 for the user Ari Raza in the database here. Change back to value 1, so the account is not locked. Apply. Okay, the application has restarted, and now we test the custom login failure handler. I used an email that doesn't exist in the database. Login, and you can see the error message bad credentials. And in the console view, you can see it prints email not exist. Perfect. That means the callback on authentication failure was actually invoked by Spring Security upon failed login by a user. And now let me use an email that exists in the database of the user Ali Raza here. And I enter a wrong password. I also got the error message bad credentials. And in the console view, you can see it prints user failed to login, and in the email of the user that were trying to log in here. Now let's implement the logic upon failed login here. We check if the user account is logged or not. If not, we check the maximum number of failed attempts. If not, we increase the failed attempts number. So here, if the user object is not known, and we also need to check if the user is enabled and the user is account is unlocked. Then we run this code. We check if the number of failed attempt is less than the maximum allowed failed attempt. So in the user service class here, we define a constant for the maximum number of failed attempt. Max failed attempts equal 3. And here we check in the failure handler, we check the number of failed attempts of the user against the maximum number. User services max failed attempt, and we need to subtract it by 1, because in the third failed attempt we will lock the user. So for the first and second failed login attempts, we display a warning message and update increase the number of failed attempts. User service increase failed attempt for the given user object, and we create this method in the user service class. Yeah, and we declare a new variable for new failed attempts equal user get failed attempt plus 1, and then we call the repo. Or in this service class, you see I have a reference to the user repository class here, and we call this method to update the number of failed login attempt. Here, repo update failed attempt with a new failed attempt and the email of the user get email. That's it. Very clear. Here. Okay, and let's save the changes and we test incrementally, step by step. We test the increase of the failed attempt number first. For the user Ali Raza in the database here, as you can see, Ali Raza. Now I reset the failed attempt for user Ali Raza to 0. Apply. Okay, the number of failed attempts of this user Ali Raza is 0. Now let me try to mimic a failed login for the user Ali Raza here, and wrong password login. And you can see the error message bad credentials. And let me check the database. And you can see for the user Ali Raza, the number of failed attempts was updated to 1 here, the first failed login attempt. And let me try the second failed attempt login the second time. Now refresh. And you can see it is updated to number 2 here. Perfect, right? And in case the number of failed attempts login made by the user equal to the maximum allowed failed attempt, we log the account and display an error message in the login page. The error message is like this: the account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts, and it will be unlocked after 24 hours. So we implement that logic here. else, meaning that the number of failed attempts equal to the max failed attempt allowed. So we lock the user service lock user, and we implement this method lock. And to lock given user, we just set the account non-locked equal false, meaning that the account is locked, and set the lock time, which is the current date and time. Yeah, and we call the user repository method to save to update this user object. That's it. And in the login failure handler, we throw an exception, throw new locked exception. The locked exception class is defined by Spring Security, and then we display the error message like this: the account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts. The account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts, and it will be unlocked after 24 hours. It will be unlocked after 24 hours. So the user must wait 1 day to be able to log in again. So this will prevent a brute force attack. Okay, save all the changes, and we are ready to test this lock user function. So as you can see, we test the code incrementally, step by step. Okay, so now you see for the user Arilaza, the number of failed attempt is 2 here. That means I have only 1 failed attempt allowed. Now let me try to log in with the wrong password again, and this time this user email will be locked. Login. Let's see, we got an error. Let's see. The exception is thrown here, but it doesn't get display in the login page. Let's see. Sorry, my mistake. We should not throw new exception. We should reassign the exception object in the method here. So here, exception equal new locked exception. Okay, save the change, and but in the database, I think the user ID data has been locked. Let's refresh user ID data here. And you can see the account non-locked status updated to 0 here. That means the user has been locked. And you can see in the column lock time, this is the date and time at which the user has been locked. And then this lock time will be used to unlock the user account. Okay, let's test another user. Okay, so for example, test the user name codejava.net user with ID 1 here, and you can see currently the failed attempt number is 0, account unlocked 1, lock time no, the account is not locked. Now let me try to make 3 failed login attempts. So the first one, bad credentials, and you can see in the database, you see failed attempt for this user is number 1 here. And the second time login, refresh, and you can see failed attempt number 2 here. And I have only 1 time. The third time this user will be locked. And you can see the error message here. The account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts. It will be unlocked after 24 hours. Here, perfect, right? And let's check the database. Let me check the database for the user name codejava.net, and you can see the account unlocked column value set to 0, meaning the user is locked and the lock time here. Next, I'm going to show you how to implement the logic to unlock the user account if the lock time expires from the time that the user account was locked. For example, after 24 hours, and when the user attempts to log in again, the application will check if the account is locked, and then if the current time is after 24 hours from the time that the user has been locked, the application will unlock the user account. So in the code, in the user service C class, we implement the unlock method here. But first, we need to declare a constant for the lock time duration. Static final long. We store the lock time duration in milliseconds. Lock time duration equal. Now, for example, 24 hour multiplied by 60 minutes per hour multiplied by 60 seconds per minute and multiplied by 1000 milliseconds per second. So this is a milliseconds for 24 hours. And for testing purpose, quickly, I just set this value to, let's see, this time is 12:53 here. And in the database, the user Ari Raja was logged on 12:45 here. So I will set the log duration is about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So 15 minutes multiplied by 60 seconds per minute and multiplied by 1000 milliseconds per second. So you see 15 minutes. And depending on it, you can change this log time duration. So we implement the unlock method here. Public void unlock for a given user object. Yeah, we get the log time of the user in millisecond. In millis equal to user get logged time. Get time that the get time method returns the value of the date in milliseconds. Okay, and then we get the current time in milliseconds. System dot current time millis, and then we compare the current time in millis against the log time in millis. If log time in millis plus log time duration, you create then the current time in milliseconds. That means the account has been locked for more than the log time duration. So then we can unlock the user. So to unlock the user, we set the account unlocked property to true, and we set the log time to null, and we set the reset the failed attempt to 0, and then we update the user repo save user and return true, else return false, meaning that the user is still in the log time. Okay, so this is the implementation of the unlock method. And then we update the custom login failure handler here. Yeah, else if the user is locked, then we try to unlock here. If user service unlock the given user object here. If the method unlock return true, that means the user has been unlocked successfully. We display an message, so we assign the exception, new unlocked exception here, and then we display the message like this. The account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again. So account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again. That's it for the unlock user function. Okay, save all the changes and we are ready to test. At this time, as you can see, 12:58 and the two users has not been logged. Two user Nam Haming and Ariraza here. Now let me try to log in as the user Ariraza here. Refresh the home page. Ariraza. And you can see it says the account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again. Seems to be perfect, right? And now let me log in with the user ID again with a correct password. Okay, you see, I have logged in successfully as the user Ali Raza here. Perfect, right? And let me check the database for the user Ali Raza here. And you can see failed attempt was updated to 0, account unlocked to 1, and log time is set to null. Perfect. Now let me try to log in with the user Nam Ming was locked at this time, and this time let's see, it should say that the user is locked. You see, account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again. So let me think, something wrong here. We set a lock time duration to 15 minutes. 15 minutes multiplied by 60 seconds per minute and multiplied by 1000 millisecond per second. And here we check log time in millis plus the log time duration. Sorry, this should be less than. Then we unlock. Sorry, my mistake. If the current time in millis greater than the log time plus the log time duration, then we unlock the user. So my mistake, very sorry. It should be less than. Okay, save the change and test again. But now in the database, the username Aming has been unlocked as well. Okay, now let me try to log in unsuccessfully 3 times. First time, second time, and third time. And you see the account has been locked due to 3 failed attempts. Yeah, and let me check the database for the username having ID1 here, and you can see number of failed attempt 2, account unlocked 0, lock time here. Okay, then we will wait after 15 minutes, and in the meanwhile, I will show you how to implement the logic to reset the number of failed attempts upon a successful login. In case there is a child to login and the first time he failed, and the maximum failed attempt is still less than the maximum number. And the next time, the second time, the user has logged in successfully, and we should reset the failed attempts number here. To do so, we need to implement a new authentication success handler. So get a new class, login success handler, custom login success handler, and this class extends the class simple URL authentication success handler here, and annotate this class using the component annotation. And we override the method on authentication success here. This callback method will be executed by Spring Security upon successful login. And in this handler class, we also need to use the user service class. So we declare a new reference of the user service class here. User service. Now in the Spring Security configuration class, we need to configure the success handler for the login here, and we declare a reference or try to a custom login success handler. Login success handler. Here we pass the reference of login success handler to configure the success handler for the authentication process here. Okay. Okay, now in this callback method on authentication success, we get the object that represents the authenticated user from the authentication object here. So because in this project I implement the user detail class, in this class you submit user details equal to authentication. You get a principal object here. This method returns the object that represents the authenticated user. And you can see the submit user details class implements the user details interface as defined by Spring Security here. And we need to cast the return object to the type submit user details. And we get the user object from this user details. User. If don't have, we need to update this class to have a getter to return a user object. And as you can see, this user details class wraps an instance of the user object here. So we just declare the method get user and return this user. Okay. And here we get the user object. And then we check the number of failed attempts. If user get failed attempt greater than 0, and then we update the database to reset the failed attempt number to 0. We don't update the database every time the user login successfully to avoid unnecessary uh, updating the database. So we call user service uh, reset failed attempt uh, for the user email, get email. Okay, in the meanwhile, you can see the time in my computer is 1 on 09 here, and let me try to log in as the username codejava.net, and this time the user is still locked. You can see user account is locked because the lock time has not been passed. Yeah, the lock time duration is 15 minutes, and this user was locked on 1 o'clock 2 minutes here. That means it will be unlocked on 1 o'clock 17 minutes. Okay, so we continue coding the reset failed attempt method here. Create this method in the user service C class. Okay, and in this method reset failed attempt, we simply call the method repo update failed attempt to 0 for the given user email. That's very simple. And we are ready to test the reset failed attempt function. Okay, save all the changes we have made so far, and the application we restart. Okay, it has been restarted, and now let me try to test the case that the failed attempt will be reset upon the successful login. Now let me try to log in as the user Isaac Henry here. So I copy the email. Sorry, just seed user is not enabled. So the user Alada Pavan here. So I copy the email. Alada Pavan. And you can see the failed attempt of this user is 0, account unlock, 1, lock time no. And now let me try to make a failed login attempt. Back credentials here. Now refresh, and you can see the user Aladan Pavan here. And you can see the failed attempt value for this user is set to 1 here. Now I log in successfully, and it should reset to 0. Email is kinda and password, if I remember correctly. Okay, I have logged in successfully as the user Alada Pavan here, as you can see, and the number of failed attempts should be reset to 0 because it's the second time I have logged in successfully. Now let's select all those from the users table again, and this time you can see the number of failed attempts reset to 0 here. Perfect, right? That means the function to reset the failed attempt was correctly implemented here. Okay, let me log out, and you can see now the time on my computer is 1 o'clock 17 minutes here, and the username Ming was logged on 1 o'clock 2 minutes, and after the log duration is 15 minutes as I defined here 15 minutes. And this time, if I try to log in again with the user Nam Ha Minh, the account should be unlocked because the lock duration time has passed. Okay, let me log in again. And you can see the message, your account has been unlocked. Please try to log in again. Perfect, right? And let me log in with the correct password. Okay, I am in the application. Yeah, and let's refresh the database, and you can see for this user Nam Ha Minh, failed attempt reset to 0, account unlocked set to 1, and lock time is set to no. Perfect, right? Awesome. So far, you have learned how to implement the limit login attempts security feature to tighten to improve security of the login process in a Spring Boot application. I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thanks for watching.